Hey, deserving listeners, tell all, let's watch. Keep in mind that since this is a psychology YouTube channel, I might get into some triggering material. Talk with your therapist before watching anything that might contain triggering material. I usually try to tell people if something is coming up that will be particularly triggering, but there's a lot of triggers to various different manifestations of PTSD and trauma reactivity. So, get the help you need and protect yourself. Let's watch.
He told me this isn't working. Months. And at one point, he actually had his friend help pack all my stuff to move out.
No.
So yes, I was kicked out twice. So at this point, I had 5 days to move out. That was it. I couch surfed, everything like that.
Wait a minute,
and I got into my own
place. Are you
place.
telling me that Ed...
I haven't been showing everything that they've been saying, but one of the things they said earlier that I didn't show is that they were asked why they broke up, and for Ed, he said, I needed some space, or I felt suffocated or something. I doubt that if I were to ask them and be there and have a conceptualization of what's really going on, I doubt I would conceptualize it as him feeling suffocated. Imagine it was more than that or something other than that. But now we're learning that this debate about kicking out, and I think they edited out where Ed gave his side of the story, which is unfortunate. I wish they would just let it breathe and so we could see the whole thing. But anyway, the fact that she was couch surfing with a child, that you would think if you were to be ethical, you're Ed, that you would say, I created the situation by love bombing you and making you move in here, at least before, and getting engaged quicker than you wanted to be. And so, because that was the whole thing when they first started dating. It was clear Liz seemingly didn't even want to be with him, but then she did, and you're like, oh. Anyway, so you would think that it would be, and who knows, I don't know all the details, but you'd think that Ed would be like, I'm not going to put you in a situation where you have to couch surf. So I'll move out if I'm suffocated or something like that, so that you and your daughter will be able to have a peaceful transition or a safe transition or a sensible transition for you and your child. Yeah, so you just think that that would be arranged, but it sounds like, at least from Liz's perspective, she was forced out, she says, twice?
I slept on couches.
Oh, wow.
You're a piece of for doing that.
Okay, well, first of all, you don't know the situation. We were fighting every day. I begged her, Liz, it's not working. Please move out.
Yeah. So if she forced herself into his place, okay, but that's not how it went down. When you agree to have your partner move into, quote unquote, your place, it is no longer your place. It's your place, collective your. Just because it was your place beforehand doesn't mean it's not her place as well. It's just that attitude of just like, well, move out, right? And, I guess if you're 20 years old or something, maybe, but you're grown adults. This isn't some situation where it's normal to be couch surfing and you have a child. Anyway, now maybe I don't understand all the details, obviously, but yeah, you just think, okay, fine, you're fighting a lot. Yeah, you can't live together. Okay, how about you do something else other than you kick her out so that she's couch surfing with her child? I think they're purposely not bringing up the kid. Now, maybe the kid was living in a stable home somewhere else, but at the very least, even for the kid's sake, the mom, Liz, should have some stability so that she can take care of her daughter or see her daughter, or, I don't know, have the capacity to. Anyway, point is yeah, that's a pretty bad perspective. There could be some sexism in there. It's just like, well, I'm the man, it's my house, or I don't know. It's pretty awful. Now, if Liz did something that was egregious, then it wouldn't justify it, but it would justify the attitude. Like if she had cheated on him or something, get out of the house. Wouldn't justify it, but would give reason. But I just think they were just continuing to fight in the way that they did on camera, which is that he gets distorted, he gets triggered, he gets distorted, he goes on the attack, she tries to defend, and he just can't hear it. He just continues to badger from various different angles. And she was learning how to defend herself, and then he says, get out of my house. Yeah, especially if the conflict was the way we saw it, because it's completely manufactured by him. He's the one who generates the conflict. It's all generating from him. She doesn't start the conflict. She does a lot to try to ameliorate the conflict. So he's just creating it all himself, according to what we saw on the TV. on the show, and then kicks her out because she's not compliant with that. I mean, yeah, that's, oh boy. And then you just hear Liz, I mean, while she's describing this, that didn't happen that long ago, she's draped over him in affection for him. And he's just like, how does that work? It's just so notable.
I'll help you in any way I can. And she wouldn't.
Because she loves you, Ed.
Let's go to Fiancé.
It has nothing to do with love. I love her too. Wait,
I told him when we got back together, I wasn't giving up.
Liz, listen, let me tell you something, give you some advice. When you get married to this guy, you have to be bold like me. My house. Take ownership of that property.
Bold like me. It's interesting to see them kind of relate to each other. Yeah. I mean, maybe Shida has in a lot of ways, that she has been quote unquote bold, but certainly the things they focus on the show, it's not Shida being, I mean, I don't want to say bold or not bold. I just want to say like putting her foot down or being, having a strong boundary. She states a lot of wishes and requests, but she seemingly at the end of the day just gives in, not only to what he wants, but the way he talks to her. Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting. She's like, you gotta be strong like I am. Now, Shida's not weak, but yeah, I don't know. Am I not picking up on? What am I doing? What's happening?
You want to marry her and you're engaged to her? You don't do that to someone.
dude, it will happen to all of you. I'm telling you right now.
No.
Won't happen
It
to me.
will eventually happen to you where you guys are not
No,
getting along.
no, it's not going to happen because we're
And
not
you do the,
bags like that, man.
respectful thing. Look,
Ed, we don't
I
run
told
from
her
it,
I
we deal
love
with
you.
it.
How does this work?
Because now he has his space, I have mine.
Yeah, they keep talking about how things are a lot better now and it's working. She was saying that they only see each other every other day. It sounds like she has to have a boundary about that she's like, no, even though you want to see me tomorrow, on principle, I'm not going to because this is the model that's working for us. And yeah, I don't know, but the way it sounds to me, as I said earlier, is that this is a phase of their relationship that they will do. I mean, they've broken up 10 times. So presumably they've had a phase like this in a lot of, if not every single cycle they've had. And they misperceive it as, oh, this is good. Or our relationship is getting better because we're not fighting. Well, it's because one, you're on your best behavior because you just came out of a lot of conflict. Two, your dependency hasn't fully entwined, hasn't fully been directed at each other because you've drawn a boundary, you've distanced yourself from the other person to some extent. Three, you are heading back into your relationship, so you're not fully back in, so you're not fully triggering each other. You're not living together, you're casually seeing each other essentially and just sticking to the fun times, the dating phase of a relationship. Now, if they kept it that way forever and managed to do that, then maybe that would be a good thing for them. And I could see that working for the two of them if they stayed there, but there's no reason to believe it's going to stay there. But you could imagine, like, if Ed were triggered, that he would take some time off, get differentiated. Maybe he would have a lot of reactivity, but there wouldn't be contact. She would be able to say, I'm out, I'm going back home. And she goes back home and he, is all upset and he has this distortions. But because he doesn't have her to fight with, it just kind of dissipates, and then eventually he calms down, and hopefully through therapy he's able to learn about his triggers and that kind of thing. So if they stayed in that zone every other day and it's just like fun date time, then maybe that work, and maybe it'd be particularly good for her family, for her daughter, so her daughter isn't thrown all around in this situation. I don't know what's happening there, but yeah, I could see that working. But I'm guessing that at the very least, eventually Ed will say, we're doing so great now, we should, and they are, they're not fighting. You should move back in. I feel like, I've grown, I've learned things, and we've worked things out, and, it won't happen again. And she, because I think she really does want that stability, and she really does want that soulmate and that person that she can depend on, that she, as a lot of people do. And I think she believes Ed is that person. She's said as much many times. She seems very bonded to him and very wanting of the connection there. And so that'll happen again, and then the triggering will happen, and it'll happen all over again. So anyway, yeah. So they're trying to explain to everyone their thinking around this, and everyone's like, it doesn't make any sense, but I don't know. It just depends on where it goes from here, really. But I can't imagine it being any different moving forward. Because a big part of this is that Ed if I understand right, which I can't tell for sure, of course, but he has abandonment and betrayal schemas. So when she is not at home with him, where he can look at her all the time, then he's going, the more he starts to allow himself to be in love and depend on her emotionally, the more he's going to worry about her abandoning him or cheating. I mean, just in the examples that we've seen on the show, the distortions that he'll warp anything into clearly an example of her being a terrible partner who's cheating on him. To not live with him would really trigger that. So if he's going, now it's possible that he'll be able to not become overly dependent on her, but it's a big, it's a tall order for people. Of any sort. I mean, all of us, regardless of our traumas, we want someone often, for a lot of us, we want that person who is really there, who lives with us, who we see every day, who sees us every day. It's a big part of our makeup for a lot of us. That's how we evolved. Clearly, we didn't evolve in apartments, in high rises that had our own car. We evolved around 50 to 100 people in our tribe and our group, and we were born into that group of people. We died in that group of people. They saw us every day. We saw them every day. We saw the good and the bad. We had many different trials and tribulations together that we could learn from experience, like that person has my back and they know I have their back, and it feels good to have that. That's what we evolved in, and we clearly depended on that for survival. We still have all those same instincts and those needs, and yet some of us don't have anyone that we're living with for years and years. We're just completely alone, and we have quote-unquote close friends or people that, according to the culture, might be defined as close. You might talk with your mom every day on the phone, and that's great, but it's probably not ideal. It's probably not a good fit for our biologies. It's sort of like asking us to never exercise and to eat only potato chips or something. Eventually, it's going to take its toll. It's not the nutrients that we need. We need the nutrients of constant awareness and connection and attachment with other people. And anyway, I go on that rant every now and then. So, there's that rant. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about empowerment. When we feel empowered, we recognize our strengths. When we feel empowered and we experience adversity, we're more likely to see it as a welcome challenge rather than an overwhelming obstacle. And since we're social creatures, we often need help from others to feel empowered at times. We might need others to give us perspective. We might need others to recognize how we might be able to overcome the obstacle. And sometimes the people around us, they're really not that much help. I've been there before. When I went to therapy for the first time when I was 19 years old, it was primarily because none of my friends were very helpful in this area. Sometimes it's really great to talk with a therapist when you want to feel more empowered. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is convenient and flexible and affordable. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
So what? You come over to his place,
Yeah.
Liz.
Yeah.
And you spend the night every other night?
Every other night, yeah.
Oh, no.
So now that we don't live together, when she's upset or I'm upset, we separate. And we don't.
Right. That's what I was saying earlier, that it might actually help them to be able to differentiate more when they're separated. Particularly, I think for him, he's able to, he's better able to see it rationally quicker than if she's right there and he's trying to convince her in his normal way. And if they're living in separate places and they're forced to separate, they can only see each other every other day, he has to take 48 hours or 24 hours of breathing space for him to eventually regulate. I could absolutely see that working, at least for conflict management. It's probably not going to help with the sort of attachment that each of them want to have, having people be a more constant part of one's life. But, some people make it work. If each of them had other people that they could sort of spread around in terms of their attachment needs, then, I could see it working, absolutely.
Fight.
So you think this new relationship is working for you?
I do. I've never been, and I know has gone down, and I'm going to own 50% of it, Liz. By us being separated, I've never felt more secure in our relationship since I met her.
So I'm encouraged by his wording here. One, he says he's 50% responsible. I don't think he actually believes that deep down, but I have no idea. Behind the scenes, he could be taking full responsibility. I don't know. And then he also says, I've never felt so secure. That word, I don't know if we've ever heard that word on this show, because that's my bread and butter. So I would notice that word. And that tells me at the very least that he's at least possibly, and maybe absolutely, paying attention to the core of it, which is emotional security, attachment security. He might even be referring to, well, when we live together, I don't feel secure, and I get triggered, and then I flip out, and I attack her, and then we're off to the races. So when we're separated, I feel more secure. I feel, and I've been saying this basically, that one, he could be less dependent and thus less likely to be triggered. But it could also mean less depth in the relationship. But I don't know. Sometimes, though, that's good. Actually, so with differentiation, which I'm often talking about, one strategy is to, in the interim while you're still developing and healing, is to learn how to differentiate. Not that it's ideal, but it gives you the ability to think straight long term. So they might be doing this directly because they do have a couples therapist that probably knows about differentiation, or they just are naturally doing this. They're just like for example, you really want a good relationship with your father, but your father, when you hang out with him for, say, more than an hour, eventually the two of you are at odds. But if you just have 45 minutes, a half an hour together once a week, it's really lovely, or at least it's non-conflictual. And so you learn to differentiate and say, like, well, for the two of us, we can manage to remain differentiated and close and pleasant and nice and maybe even very caring and very loving for about a half an hour. But eventually we start to fuse and become too dependent or too triggered or too unable to, realize what's my part and what's his part or something. And so we learn and this is an approach that sometimes people have with their entire family of origin. Like, okay, Thanksgiving, I can handle 2 hours, but anything beyond that, I start to lose sight of who I am. I start to fall back into my old role. I start to get triggered more, and everything falls apart. So 2 hour mark, I'm out of there. Or 2 hour mark, I walk around the block or go to the store, redifferentiate, come back to the house, something like that. So they're doing, they're potentially doing that in this relationship. It's not ideal because, like I was saying earlier, a lot of us really depend on that constant attachment, awareness, a real felt sense of like, that person knows me, I know them, we're in each other's space, we depend on each other 24/7. There's over-dependency, of course, but I think baseline, that's how we are normally. So you're not allowed to have that, but given the circumstances, maybe that's the best. There's another possibility that I've also been conceptual or speculating that, at the very least for Ed, maybe for both of them, that they're deluding themselves into believing that because they're not conflictual during this phase, then they've gotten better. And then they can be lulled into complacency, go back to the way relationship was before she moves in, and the conflict happens all over again. I mean, they've broken up 10 times. So there's a possibility. That would be the most likely thing that'll happen in my book. Or they've said, no, we've broken up 10 times this time, and they're in couple therapy. This time we're going to do it differently. We're going to hold the line. We're going to resist the urge, and it'll be better for the two of us. Yeah. Now, everyone's looking at them with disgust, like, oh, that's ridiculous. That's stupid. And I don't know where they're coming from. Like, what do they know about any of this? I think what they're operating from, the other cast members, is that they just shouldn't be together, that it's a ridiculous notion that they're still together, and that Liz puts up with too much crap, and that's where they're operating from. And, you could make an argument for that, but I think it's more complicated than that. All right, well, I want to thank you if you've liked this video, give them the old thumbs up, or subscribe to my YouTube channel. It does help us to do that if you care to. I think even giving us a thumbs down helps us. That doesn't feel good emotionally when I look at that, but I think the algorithm is such that even if you give a thumbs down or you write some really nasty thing in the comment section, the algorithm just wants engagement. So I guess you could help us by giving us a thumbs down, but it will make my emotions not do so well. But, you know, hey, them's the breaks, you know. It's the consequence of making a crappy video. So, yeah, but everyone, please, either way, thumbs up, thumbs down to me. Take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.